Hey everyone, welcome to another Conversation Over Drinks. I'm Coach Wolverine.
Coach Kelowna.
And today we're going to chat about how to not become a victim to media manipulation. This should be interesting. Keeping this kosher, of course. So, media manipulation, what does that even entail? Marketing?
Yeah.
Now with marketing, I think one of the biggest manipulations that I see first and foremost is the trigger point of scarcity or fear. And from my psychology background, I know that you can control a ton of people just through scarcity and fear.
Psychology. So we had marketing and advertising classes where we had entire classes on fear of loss and fear of this and fear of that and all that, right? So it's a known fact these things work. But if you look at everything, and I mean, if you look at everything from like political ads across the spectrum, there's fear of something. Are you afraid of this happening? Nothing's happened, but are you afraid of this happening? Well, you can't go that way. Or you've got your, what other ones would be super big?
Well, I mean, just touch on that political one is there's implementation of a fear that would not have originally been there until that thought was brought forward.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, for example, let's say, hey Kyle, we're gonna go camping this weekend, but there was a bear at that site, so you need to prepare. Okay. You're gonna prepare for this bear, right? Yeah. Whereas if we're camping, it's like, whoa, there's a bear. You're not going to listen to whatever I say. You're going to do whatever the heck you can to make sure you're safe. This is the difference between manipulation and just like, I'm implanting, like there was a bear, so you better prepare. You're going to do
what's bear prepare things.
Exactly. But so with the fear of fear, that is how we become subject to the manipulation. Whereas if there's actual emotional fear, we are then go into survival mode. We're not manipulable.
On that note too, would you say that being bombarded with fear marketing or whatever you want to call so much has created a higher level of anxiety in most people you discussed? Anything with?
Absolutely. But I do think there's also a small fractional percentage where it numbs the people due to overstimulation of it. Kind of like when, if you're just slap your arm so long, eventually it's not going to hurt anymore. So I do think that there are specific personality types where when it's just blasted all over the place, eventually they're just like, okay, it's cool news, like whatever.
So they don't care, right? Or they pick a side of the fence, and they lie on that side of the fence, and they'll die on that hill, and the other side could be the most rational argument, could be whatever, from either end, but they're still going to die on that hill because they've just been desensitized to that, right? They've been whoever. And then we get into like villainization and like dehumanization and all those other topics that happen, which like if you want to look at when you're younger and you're in the schoolyard or whatever, and you got to get around rumors and all that other jazz, which I'm sure is so much worse now with all the tech, but it's the same things, right? Like if you get the word out there first, if you start it, you can manipulate it, you can do all these things. And once you understand that that's how a micro social circle works, it's not hard to kind of move that into a macro scale, and who controls what we hear or see on the macro scale, right? So then you get into media, you get into the government, political, whatever, and then you inherently get to conspiracy theories. But the biggest thing is when you need to sit there and look at like, what am I afraid of and why am I afraid of it, and who is delivering me this information? So if I'm looking at an ad and they're putting a fear out there, and I was like, why does that person want me to think that? Yeah. Right. And that's the first step in questioning that you need to ask when you see something. Why do they want me to have this response? Yeah. And then what does that response get them? And now you can kind of track it, and then you kind of see where it goes. Yep. And more often than not, it's going to be where the money goes. Yep. But start looking at social problems or social trends. Like what was that show, that Korean show, Squid Games, a couple years ago? And then it was one of the most popular. It was one of the most popular things on Netflix, and it was one of the most popular Halloween costumes that year. Mm-hmm. Right, so you put it there, and that's what it was, because it was this social trend that just blew up. Yep. And like it was okay. It wasn't blown anyone's mind, but you put it in there. It's the same thing with any other social like phenomenon going viral of any kind. It's put there, and we never know what's going to happen.
Well, see, circling back to your other point of like when there's a whole bunch of it that's pushed out there and like what is going to happen to the other percentage of it. And I think it causes a state of overwhelm and anxiety when all of a sudden, because just like positivity breeds positivity, because everything in life is. It's neither good or bad, but the way we perceive it is what makes it so. If we are in this position and all of a sudden something we're told is bad is put in our face, and it's like, well, crap, that sucks. And then we now have notch number one. And we live in a society where we have been conditioned to think, well, bad things happen in 3, so now what bad is going to happen next? And we then look for the next bad and the next bad. And the individuals who are manipulating the marketing know this, so they just interject it more and more and more. So it's almost like we become programmed to then look for the bad. I'm sure everybody has witnessed that there's something really bad happening almost on a weekly basis. Almost to the day.
Exactly, yeah.
And does anybody not think that this is coincidental?
Well, it's just a lot, right? And I mean, what we talk about too, when we're talking about things to overcome this, what we've talked about it before, your brain is basically incapable of being anxious and grateful at the same time. So if we're feeling anxious and we're feeling overwhelmed and we're feeling all these things, you need to double down on gratitude. That's taking your personal inventories. That's really taking a look at what you have, not what you don't have, the people you have, everything around you, and being grateful for it. It's one of the pillars of what I do. It's one of the pillars of what I do with all my clients, everything. Like it's just, it doesn't have a cap. And I'll say that all the time. There's no cap to like being grateful and positive.
No. And honestly, getting into that and how to overcome that is to focus on your own lane. That's what I boiled down to. I've actually had this conversation with people before, and they did not like my response.
We've had this conversation.
Yeah, you agreed with me though. But you focus on your own stuff. You don't focus on what's going on here, because just because we see something in the news or something's plastered on social media, or basically those are the 2 biggest ones. Nobody listens to radio anymore. I guess we got some people that still listen to radio. Okay, I guess I don't listen to radio anymore. So I got the news and social media, and I don't listen to the news, so I guess I got social media and whomever I converse with. Shoot, I just lost. The train just fell off the tracks. Totally lost where I was going with that one.
Stay in your lane.
Oh, yes, focusing on your own stuff. So, yes, it's important to think about other people. But I think it's important to be considerate of other people. But we still have to put our self first. Because if we don't put ourselves first and we're consistently giving our attention away and away and away and away, we show up as a shell of ourselves. And if we show up as a shell of ourselves, how in the heck are we supposed to help anybody?
Fill your own cup and it'll spill over. Right?
Exactly. It's the concept of it's literally the Gandhi. Be the change you want to see. When we heal ourselves and when we focus on ourselves and when we do our own thing and focus on our stuff, we get better to be able to help other people as opposed to pouring from an empty cup.
And I think the biggest thing is when, especially on social media, right, you decide where you fall on an issue, and then you go and everything's going to kick up that supports your side of the issue, and you blast that out to as many people as you can. Mm-hmm. And you're going to largely blast that out to people that are going to agree with you because you want the validation. And then you're going to blast that out to people that don't because you think you can save them, which is like, again, you're not actually doing anything. You've done nothing. Like you haven't done an actionable anything at all. So go facilitate something where people can come and feel better about themselves. Go do something.
Well, you save yourself and you become the example. That's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. So if you become the example that you're trying to preach, people are going to look at you and be like, "Oh, it is possible." That's where the term "leading by example" comes from. And so,
there's a quote too, I'm going to butcher it, but I'll get to it later.
If basically how I look at it is if something is being pumped in the media. Now, of course, it's different if it's like, hey, there's a tornado happening. Then listen, like that's not what we're talking about here. Clearly, it's the marketing specifically. But if the masses are following it, is questioning, like, do we actually want to follow this? Like if everyone is doing it, I probably don't want to be doing it.
We've talked about this. This revs me up. So when we do because I'm back into somewhat of a 9-to-5 schedule. When I'm driving home and everyone else on the planet is driving home, I hate it.
It's awful.
It's a 2-minute drive and it takes me 15 and I'm just like, stop it.
Just laying on the horn the entire way. Everybody will move or get annoyed at me eventually.
It drives me. It's the same thing, right? You pull up to a red light at 1 a.m., you look in all directions, there's nobody there. Just drive through the light.
I run the red at 1 in the morning.
All the time.
Sorry, cops.
But like, it doesn't make sense to me.
No.
And but it's the same thing, right? If you're doing the same thing everybody else is, like, why?
It's that herd mentality. And
it's
honestly,
easy.
It's easy because then we don't have to think for ourselves. And that's what it boils down to, is when we are subject to the marketing, like the manipulative type of marketing, whether it is to buy something, well, it's always to buy something, whether or not it's a product or it's an idea. But when we're in that state and it's being pushed, it's sitting there like, do I actually want to inherit this belief?
And it's your path of least resistance, right?
Exactly. But what it boils down to is, does this thought serve you? If the answer is no, don't entertain it. Like, what's the point? I really don't see the point.
I mean, we're not saying be like ignorant or anything.
No,
like
not
that.
be ignorant. Be informed.
Yeah.
But focus on your own stuff.
Like, know what's happening, but don't invest in something. If say for instance, right, you're not totally sure if you're going to have enough money for food for the next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Don't engage in arguments online. You need to do something else. Like, stop giving that there. Like, there's a whole nother world in which you need to elevate yourself to do that, and then put yourself in a position to then have the freedom to, one, like, get it more educated and have more intellectual conversations, etc. But to do that to a point where you can actually start inputting value into these conversations, because it's really hard. It's like, and I don't love using this example, but a lot of people want to talk about it in fitness, right? It's like, you don't really want a trainer that's not in shape.
No.
Right. And
nobody wants to talk about it because it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth, guys. It is. Like, it just, like, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I'm not going to go to a plumber to fix my computer.
And I mean, yeah.
That's an entire topic that could get very, so basically is to avoid media manipulation is just, I'm a big believer. Focus on your own stuff. Be aware, but if the thought doesn't serve you, then carry on.
The best thing you can do to help those around you, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We always have this feeling that we're gonna save or help or do or whatever. We're not usually running around and wanting to be like malicious in whatever. We're not. You're not the bad guy in your own story kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So the best thing you can do for the people around you is to go be the best version of yourself. And we talked about that. That's fill your own cup first. Do all that stuff. And that's what's going to help overcome this, because then you can look at an idea and be like, no, like it doesn't matter. Then marketing, especially products, you can look at a product and instead of being like, I need that for the dopamine hit because I haven't done anything to make myself feel good today, you don't have to do that, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden things like finances start trending in the right direction. Like, all of this starts happening when you start prioritizing yourself, putting yourself first, and the people around you, you then have more time and eventually more money and stuff to be a part of these things. And I think that's the biggest thing when we talk about overcoming these manipulations is just stop injecting yourself into things. When we've had that discussion before, if you're not ready to have your mind changed, you're wasting your time and you're wasting the other person's time. So you're doing no one any favors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's pretty much the biggest thing there, without getting any more animated about
animated. That's a good way to put it.
So it's a soft one. I mean, but it's at the front for everybody right now. We're seeing it everywhere, as we are with any political election stuff, whether it's north or south of the border. We're going to hear about all of this because we're on socials, etc. It's going to be right there, and it's ripe for us to get mad about. But again, if you're struggling to do anything, or like if you're struggling to get started in the gym and you spend an hour arguing online, you could have done a workout.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can call a friend and have an intellectual conversation for a half hour instead of arguing with strangers. There's so many things you can do that are good for you with that time. So stop burning it on stuff that just doesn't matter. Yeah. I think that's it. That's it for me. Like,
I got nothing else to add to that one, guys. So as always, please like, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you're consuming this content on. Have a fantastic day. Cheers.